It all began subtly, a whisper of change in the rhythm of our lives. Sarah, my wife of 7 years, had always been an open book, her emotions as transparent as the morning dew. But lately, a veil had descended, a delicate, almost imperceptible shift in her demeanor. Late nights at the office became more frequent, her phone a constant companion, clutched possessively even during our quiet evenings. I dismissed it at first as the pressures of her new project, a demanding role she'd recently taken on. I was a software engineer, immersed in lines of code and logical constructs, perhaps too logical to see the emotional chaos brewing right under my nose. I trusted her implicitly, a trust built on years of shared dreams, laughter, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone so deeply. We had met in college, two awkward souls finding solace in each other's company, navigating the complexities of early adulthood hand in hand. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair, a testament to our belief that our love was enough, a self-contained universe needing no grand declarations. We had planned our future meticulously, down to the color of the nursery walls for the children we hoped to have. This life, our life, was my anchor, my constant. But anchors can drag, and constants can shift. The subtle changes escalated. Her once vibrant eyes, always sparkling with a mischievous glint, now held a distant, almost guarded look. Our conversations, once free-flowing and effortless, became stilted, punctuated by long silences. She'd often stare into space, a faint, unreadable smile playing on her lips, as if privy to a secret world I wasn't invited to. I tried to bridge the growing chasm, to ask, to understand. "Is everything all right, love?" I'd ask, my voice laced with concern. She'd offer a quick, dismissive "fine, just tired," and retreat further into herself. The scent of a new, unfamiliar perfume began to cling to her clothes, a sweet, cloying fragrance that was decidedly not hers. I told myself it was a new client, a new colleague, anything to avoid the gnawing suspicion that was beginning to take root in my gut. My logical mind, usually my greatest asset, was now my tormentor, presenting scenarios I desperately wanted to ignore. I started noticing the small things, the almost imperceptible details that, when pieced together, formed a horrifying mosaic. A receipt for a fancy dinner for two, when she claimed to have worked late. A sudden interest in a new genre of music, one I'd never heard her mention before. A casual mention of a weekend trip with friends that felt oddly vague. Each piece was a tiny shard, sharp and painful, slowly cutting away at the foundation of my trust. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. She had told me she was working late, a familiar refrain. But a mutual friend, oblivious to the storm brewing, casually mentioned seeing Sarah at a new, trendy bar across town, laughing with a man whose description sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Tall, dark hair, a distinctive scar above his left eyebrow. It matched the vague, unsettling image that had been forming in my mind. I confronted her that night, my voice surprisingly calm despite the earthquake raging within me. "Where were you tonight, Sarah?" I asked, my eyes fixed on hers, searching for a flicker of truth. Her usual dismissive response faltered. Her eyes darted, her hands trembled slightly. The lie, when it came, was weak, a flimsy curtain trying to hide a gaping wound. I was at the office, Mark. You know how it is." But her voice lacked conviction, the usual effortless deception replaced by a strained whisper. I pushed, gently at first, then with a growing intensity, each question a hammer blow against the fragile facade she had built. Finally, the dam broke. Tears, a torrent of them, and then the confession, tumbling out in a rush of shame and regret. His name was David, a colleague, charming, attentive, everything I, in my quiet, analytical way, had perhaps ceased to be. The details were a blur, a painful cacophony of betrayal. The dates, the stolen moments, the whispered promises. Each word was a fresh stab, twisting the knife deeper into my heart. The world, as I knew it, shattered around me. The initial shock gave way to a cold, calculated rage. It wasn't the fiery, impulsive anger I'd seen in movies, but a chilling, methodical fury that settled deep in my bones. My logical mind, once a source of torment, now became my greatest weapon. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would not break. I would plan, I would execute, and I would make sure she understood the true cost of her betrayal. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of life, a ghost in my own home. Sarah, racked with guilt, tried to apologize, to explain, to mend what was irrevocably broken. But her words were hollow, echoing in the vast emptiness of my shattered trust. I nodded, I listened, I even offered a semblance of comfort, all the while meticulously constructing my revenge. I started with the financial. I had always handled our joint accounts, our investments. It was easy to slowly, imperceptibly siphon off funds, transferring them to a new secret account. I knew her habits, her spending patterns, her blind spots. She wouldn't notice, not until it was too late. I also began to gather evidence, not for a messy divorce, but for my own satisfaction. Screenshots of texts, emails, even a few discreetly placed recording devices in the house. I wanted a complete picture, a full understanding of the depth of her deceit. I wanted to see her world unravel, just as mine had. I wanted her to feel the same cold, calculated precision of betrayal that I had endured. My plan was a symphony of destruction, each note carefully chosen, each movement designed to inflict maximum impact. It was not about hurting her physically, but about dismantling her life, piece by agonizing piece. I wanted her to feel the slow, suffocating grip of consequences, the realization that her actions had a ripple effect, destroying not just our shared past, but her future as well. I wanted her to understand that some wounds never truly heal, and some betrayals can never be forgiven. This was not about anger anymore. It was about justice, my own twisted version of it, and I would see it through to the bitter end. The next phase of my plan involved her career. Sarah was a rising star in her marketing firm, her ambition a driving force. She had recently been vying for a major promotion, a position she coveted deeply. I knew the key players, the internal politics, the subtle rivalries within her company. I had, after all, been her confidant for years, privy to all her professional anxieties and aspirations. I began to anonymously leak carefully curated information, not outright slander, but subtle hints, veiled suggestions of unprofessional conduct, of a lack of dedication. I used burner emails and VPNs, leaving no digital footprint. I highlighted her frequent late nights and business trips in a way that raised questions, not accusations. I knew the corporate world thrived on whispers and innuendo, and I was a master of both. The goal wasn't to get her fired, not yet. It was to sow seeds of doubt, to make her promotion an uphill battle, to chip away at her professional reputation, just as she had chipped away at mine. I wanted her to feel the constant pressure, the subtle erosion of her standing, the paranoia of not knowing who or what was working against her. I wanted her to experience the slow, agonizing death of a dream she had sacrificed our marriage for. Simultaneously, I began to isolate her socially. Our circle of friends was intertwined, a tapestry woven with shared experiences and mutual affections. I started subtly, planting seeds of concern among those closest to her. A casual remark about her recent distance, a feigned worry about her unusual behavior. I never explicitly mentioned David, never accused her directly. Instead, I let their imaginations fill in the blanks, guiding them towards the inevitable conclusion. I knew Sarah valued her social standing, her image as the perfect wife, the successful professional. To have that image tarnished, to feel the subtle shift in their attitudes, the hesitant smiles, the averted gazes, that would be a punishment far more potent than any direct confrontation. I wanted her to feel the chill of isolation, the creeping realization that her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, brick by painful brick. I wanted her to understand the loneliness of betrayal, the emptiness that comes from having no one left to trust. I wanted her to feel the same profound sense of abandonment that had consumed me. My revenge was a slow burn, a meticulously orchestrated symphony of psychological warfare. I continued to live in the same house, sharing the same bed, maintaining the facade of a grieving husband trying to cope with a difficult period. This proximity was crucial, allowing me to observe her reactions, to gauge the effectiveness of my tactics. I watched as the stress lines deepened around her eyes, as her once vibrant energy slowly drained away. I saw the flicker of fear in her gaze when her phone rang, the desperate attempts to salvage her professional relationships, the forced cheerfulness in social gatherings that barely masked her growing despair. Each sign of her suffering was a small victory, a confirmation that my plan was working. I was a silent observer, a puppeteer pulling the strings of her unraveling life. I found a grim satisfaction in her misery, a perverse sense of justice in witnessing her downfall. It was a dark, consuming satisfaction, one that I knew, deep down, would never truly heal the wound she had inflicted, but it offered a temporary balm to my shattered soul. Then came the final act, the grand crescendo of my revenge. I had been meticulously collecting evidence of her affair, not just for my own knowledge, but for public consumption. I had created a detailed timeline, complete with dates, locations, and damning excerpts from texts and emails. I had even managed to obtain a few discreet photographs, undeniable proof of her infidelity. I chose her company's annual gala, a high-profile event she had been instrumental in organizing, as the stage for my final performance. It was a night she had been looking forward to, a night where she hoped to finally secure her promotion, to reclaim her professional standing. I arrived late, impeccably dressed, a picture of calm composure. Sarah, initially relieved to see me, offered a strained smile. She had no idea what was coming. As the CEO began his speech, praising the team's efforts, I discreetly connected my phone to the main projector, overriding the presentation with my own. The first slide appeared, a stark, black background with the words, "The truth about Sarah." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Sarah's face went ashen. The subsequent slides detailed her affair, the timeline, the evidence, each revelation a hammer blow to her carefully constructed image. The room descended into a stunned silence, broken only by the occasional whisper. Her colleagues, her superiors, her friends, all bore witness to her public humiliation. I watched her, her eyes wide with horror, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling uncontrollably. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. I had stripped her bare, exposed her deceit to the world, and in doing so, I had finally, irrevocably, broken her. I felt nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction. My revenge was complete. I had won. But as I walked out of that ballroom, leaving behind the shattered remnants of her life, a profound emptiness settled over me. The victory felt hollow, the satisfaction fleeting. The revenge, while meticulously executed, had not brought back what I had lost. It had not healed the pain, nor had it erased the scars. It had merely transformed me from a loving husband into a vengeful architect of destruction. And in that moment, I realized that revenge, while sweet in its pursuit, often leaves a bitter aftertaste, a lingering sense of loss for the person you once were. My initial plan, the financial drain, was already in motion. I had set up a series of automated transfers, small enough to go unnoticed individually, but significant when accumulated. Each transfer was a tiny prick, a slow bleed that would eventually incapacitate her. I also began to subtly manipulate her credit score. Knowing her reliance on credit cards for her lavish lifestyle, I made sure certain payments were delayed, just enough to trigger late fees and negative marks on her report. It was a silent, insidious attack on her financial stability, a constant reminder of her precarious position. I envisioned her struggling with denied credit applications, the frustration of being unable to maintain her accustomed lifestyle. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. This wasn't about money for me. It was about control, about showing her the consequences of her reckless actions. I wanted her to feel the tightening noose of financial insecurity, the constant worry that gnaws at your peace of mind. I wanted her to understand that every choice has a cost, and hers was about to become very expensive. The social isolation, too, was progressing as planned. I continued to cultivate my image as the wronged husband, the victim of a cruel betrayal. I allowed myself to appear vulnerable, to confide in mutual friends about my struggles, carefully omitting any details that would implicate me in her downfall. I painted a picture of a man heartbroken but resilient, a man trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. This narrative resonated with our friends, who, in their sympathy for me, subtly distanced themselves from Sarah. Invitations to social gatherings became less frequent for her. Her calls went unanswered, and her attempts to connect were met with polite but firm rejections. I watched as her social calendar, once brimming with engagements, slowly emptied. The silence of her phone, once a source of irritation, now became a testament to my success. I wanted her to feel the sting of ostracization, the cold shoulder of former friends, the crushing weight of loneliness. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be abandoned, to be cast aside by those you once held dear. I wanted her to experience the same isolation that had enveloped me in the wake of her betrayal. The professional sabotage was perhaps the most satisfying. I had access to her company's internal network through a backdoor I discovered years ago, a relic from a time when I'd helped her set up her home office. I used this access to subtly alter her project deadlines, to misplace important documents, to send out conflicting instructions to her team. These were not overt acts of sabotage, but rather a series of small, seemingly innocuous errors that, when combined, created an impression of incompetence and disorganization. Her once impeccable reputation began to fray at the edges. Her superiors, initially supportive, grew increasingly frustrated with her perceived lapses. The promotion she so desperately craved slipped further and further from her grasp. I even managed to leak a few carefully edited snippets of her conversations with David, making it appear as though she was prioritizing her affair over her work. The whispers in the office grew louder, the glances more pointed. I wanted her to feel the constant pressure of underperformance, the fear of losing everything she had worked so hard for. I wanted her to understand the precariousness of success, the ease with which it can be snatched away. I wanted her to experience the same professional insecurity that her actions had inflicted upon me. As the weeks turned into months, the cumulative effect of my actions became undeniable. Sarah, once vibrant and confident, was now a shadow of her former self. Her eyes, once sparkling with ambition, were now dull and lifeless. Her laughter, once infectious, was replaced by a strained silence. She lost weight, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. The once meticulous care she took with her appearance was gone, replaced by a weary indifference. She spent her evenings alone, staring blankly at the television, her phone lying forgotten beside her. The guilt, the isolation, the professional setbacks, they had all taken their toll. She was a broken woman, and I, the architect of her destruction, watched it all unfold with a chilling detachment. I had achieved my goal. I had made her pay. But the victory, as I had suspected, was hollow. The satisfaction, fleeting. The revenge, while meticulously executed, had not brought me peace. It had merely consumed me, transforming me into something I no longer recognized. The man who had loved Sarah, who had built a life with her, was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating strategist. And in that moment, I realized that the true cost of revenge was not just the destruction of another, but the annihilation of oneself. The scars she had inflicted remained, but now, I bore new ones, self-inflicted wounds from the battle I had waged. The emptiness that had settled over me in the ballroom remained, a constant companion, a stark reminder of the price of my victory. I had won the war but lost myself in the process. And as I looked at the broken woman across the room, I knew that neither of us would ever truly recover. The silence in the house was deafening, a monument to our shattered lives. The revenge was complete, but the unraveling continued, a slow, agonizing descent into a future neither of us had ever envisioned.